Good morning.
I am so excited that you've chosen to spend your Saturday morning with Hearne Fine Art. I am Garbo Hearne, the director of Hearne Fine Art, and I'm excited to be here and to have our very special guest. This is the second reception for Africobra, which stands for African Commune of Bad Relevant Artists. And to me, this is history, because this is the first time that they have done a gallery show in how many years or ever? Tell me.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. So to have them in Arkansas and to have the abundance of beautiful work and to have them here talking is amazing to me. This morning we have our special guest, Dr. Pamela Russ, who is the Dean of Education at Tougaloo College, to handle our panel discussion. And this is Moya, Kevin, Michael, and Edward. Thank you all.
Greetings.
Greetings.
As the United States. We're going to be very informal because we have a small group, so we actually want a lot of time for you to pose questions to the panel. And we're going to start off, we had 2 segments we were going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about how, as a collector, to start off. How do I start off being a collector? What do I look for in types of things and those type of things. So what I'm going to have each panelist do and take about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll finish that segment and just talk to them about, I'm a person that comes to you and I'm interested in becoming a collector of Black art that represents and speaks to the soul. So what would you suggest that we start off? How would we start this? What things do we look at? And if you can just tell us something that's unique about yourself as an artist, and then expound on that topic. 3 to 5 minutes. Start with you.
For someone who wants to begin being a collector, I would think you would ask yourself 2 questions. One, what do I like? Because if you see something that you like, you're going to live with it. So make sure you start there, because this is going to nourish you at home. It's going to nourish your day. It's going to, be something that comes and, let's say, helps take the day off of you. In the larger sense, what are you trying to accomplish as a collector? Are you trying to fill your space with something that you enjoy, that gives you visual delight and meaning in your life? Or are you interested in the long run in collecting work that might have a certain value as you move forward? Because certain people like to invest. So you can begin thinking about those things, identifying aspects of yourself, and then you start reading and learning and asking questions. Because a long time ago, I had this program I was presenting to my students at Morehouse College. And in the program, he said that most people thinking, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. And he said the best interpretation of that should be, I don't know much about art, but I like what I know. So the more you know, the larger reservoir you have to select from in terms of your choices. There are things that you might not know you like yet, right? Like when you were a kid, you didn't know you liked broccoli.
Well, I guess for me, I think the number one thing is education. And when a lot of collectors, some of the NBA basketball players, they came to me, especially during our walk, I said, buy Halima Taha books, collecting works on paper and canvas by African American artists. First of all, the education part become the major part. Number 2, I asked them to go and look and see. Look at artwork. What is so unique about that artwork that speaks to you? And for me, the work has to speak to you. And then when you look at the idea of collecting, why am I collecting? Are you collecting a part of your culture? Because you got to ask yourself why. Because at the end of the day, as you grow older, what are you gonna do with it? What happens to your collection when you're not here? So the education, I think, is the most important part.
what's most important to me is buying something that I can invest my money in, because the stock market falls. Suddenly this money disappears. You have nothing to hold on to. Whereas if you bought art, it's like putting money in the bank. The value, most of the time, doesn't fall. It appreciates. And it doesn't just disappear like the stock market disappears. There's nothing to hold on to. So even if it's simply to hold down money, it's a good way. Art is a good way to do that. If you decide, I'm going to be buying 5% of whatever I will put in the bank, just as an addition to whatever that saving is. The dollar is very strong, but in many countries, like where I come from, the money is not strong at all. Your entire savings could almost disappear in the bank when the currency falls. So art as investment is very important, and I really encourage that.
Thank you so much. So we want to share a little bit with the whole segment of just the collection. So now we're going to move into the big one. Why we that's Africobra. And I want you to know that this is the longest running organization collecting for the history of the nation's history. They're about to celebrate 50 years in 2018. But we're going to talk about, we have the newest member, middle member, and what is the oldest, if you don't know the oldest.
He is the oldest.
You got the newest, the middle, and the oldest. So what we're going to ask is different perspectives and take a little longer than about 7 minutes. And we're going to talk about two people, the oldest member. Give us some perspective on this. No, this is history making me proud. The origins, why, how did you come together? What was the main purpose? And give us that feel. And then Kevin, if you can talk about this invitation of only, how did you get to become a part of it, and why did you want to become a part of it? And our newest member, what are your perceptions as being a part of this group that's about to celebrate 50 years, your perspective of being a part of it? Share.
When the group started, there was an organization of Obasi in Chicago, and I think it was the Organization of Black American Culture or something like that. And it included music, art, and literature. And AACM, the Art Asylum in Chicago, Newell Abrams were on the musical side, Winifred Brooks, and Haki Mahmoudi and others were on the writing side. And then on the visual side, we had some of the people who ended up founding Africobra after doing the Walk of Respect. And I wasn't there in Chicago. I didn't become a member until 11 years later, in 1979. But Jeff Donaldson, Wadsworth Gerald, and others worked on the Wall of Respect, which started the whole outdoor movement, murals movement in the United States. And then they started Africobra, which was a group that was supposed to identify an aesthetic for an African American community. And so the references and the color and the audience that was assumed was for this community, and creating a visibility and a voice that was not present necessarily. It was something other than trying to gain entree into the larger art world, which was largely resistant. And still, it only allows a handful of people to come into that world in terms of museum collection, The Black Arts Movement is still not well collected, but Africobra provided an alternative for that. I became a member after finishing grad school under some of these people at Howard University. And the first major exhibition I was a part of with Africobra was at the invitation of the Committee Against Apartheid of the United Nations. And we gave an exhibition in 1980 to commemorate the 4th anniversary of the June 16th, 1976 Soweto massacre. And so we had a group project to deal with that and just move forward. So that was a part of my experience. And then as I grew, because Jeff Donaldson, as a founding member, was one of the few people to have both a PhD and, an art background. But he was such a powerful figure. He was the American director of the participation in FESTAC in '77. He organized this amazing conference called Confaba in 1970 when he was at Northwestern. And he was an inspiration to me, so eventually I went on to get my doctorate, and to kind of build upon his legacy as well. And after he passed, I've tried to help reconceptualize our purpose so that tomorrow is appropriate for the moment that we're in now, which is very different than 1968 when it formulated. So I'll stop there.
Okay, I guess for me,
Before we get started, I was the force behind both of them becoming members because I respected their work so much and who they were as people so much. So on the inside, I worked to get them both in.
I think it was 2004, three, and I became a member in 2006. Michael had suggested and asked me several times if I was interested, but let me go back further. I knew the late Jeff Johnson because I attended the University of Arkansas in Lubbock. He would always come back and talk about Africobra. And, being a sophomore freshman, I didn't know to what extent they were doing. So then I took an art history class under the late Terrence Corbin, and he probably explained what they were doing. And he said, well, they're like the Black Panthers of the art movement. And I like that. So when he said that, I started doing more research. And actually, Jeff invited me to come to graduate school at Howard, but I ended up going to another graduate program. But I would always read about Africobra, read about their aesthetics. And that was an article that came out in the new Art Examiner, stating Jeff was talking about Black aesthetics. And I was in grad school at University of Illinois. And being there, I remember the professors telling me to tone my colors down. Your paint's a little bit too bold. So the next day, the new art examiner comes out. Jeff's talking about the same thing. So then, if I fast forward, I moved to Atlanta. I met Michael and Wadsworth Jarrell, another founding member. Wadsworth Jarrell, I was teaching at Georgia State part-time. We ended up talking, and Wadsworth invited me by his studio. I went in that afternoon about 6 o'clock. I left at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was so enamored with Wadsworth's work. And at that time, Wadsworth, he was getting ready to, withdraw from Africa. And my career was just getting started. Everybody kept asking, why do you want to be part of the group? But in the meantime, looking at the aesthetic part, my work fit within the group. And being invited to me was very exciting. And I remember the first show at Hampton I went in, I got emails from people all over the country. You're part of Africobra, you're part of Africobra. Wow. How did you get in? And I said, I was nominated and I was voted in. So that's how I became a part of Africobra.
Was 1990 when you came to Nigeria?
91.
91. I was in my studio in Nigeria. My house was my studio in Nigeria where Michael Harris walked in one day, and he was writing his dissertation. He was doing research for his dissertation at Yale, and I was teaching in the university in Nigeria, and I was also leading. I had founded a group of artists called Honor, and what was going on was that as the European teachers, European collectors began to move out of Nigeria, we realized that nothing was going on anymore, and that we needed to do something. And so I started that group to do that, which the idea of the group was to develop an Africanist aesthetics. And the way I defined it was with the use of materials that were available within our environment. And I focused exclusively on using soil colors for my work. I would collect colors of the soil from various places, and I would use them. And I was explaining my work to Michael Harris, who wanted to include me in that dissertation. And I began to discuss with him in terms of African colors and African pigments. And he told me that you don't have to be limited to the soil colors, because you can begin to explore colors of the fabrics, colors that you find in the various indigenous traditions in which brilliant colors were being used. And also that, as a matter of fact, he belonged to this group of artists that use really vibrant colors. That for me was very liberating, in the sense that I love colors. But I had intentionally restricted myself for ideological purposes, because my belief is that art is not just about what you see. It's also, there are lots of things you don't see behind the object. So for me, what was actually more important was what you couldn't see in the object. But he liberated me by now giving me this power to begin to use whatever color that I could find. So I began to use Africobra colors before I even became a member of the Africobra many years ago.
Well, let's expand on that a little bit. Like Michael and Kevin to talk on that. The power of color. In the artistry and the Africobra experience. One of your family members talked about everybody was drinking Kool-Aid at the time, so we used Kool-Aid colors to convey. Could you just share a little bit of that? How that works?
Again, I wasn't in Chicago in the beginning, so I didn't know.
I'm
But what I found out, Wadsworth told me he went to the Bahamas, I think, on his honeymoon, and he saw this color in the environment. And I grew up in Cleveland, and I noticed that winter started early and it was gray. The sun came out a few months later, but it wasn't the sun that when I finally got to Georgia that I see down there. Down here, your sun is much and more intense and thicker and brighter than what we were growing up under in Chicago and Cleveland. And then when we think about where Africans live, African diaspora, it's in these environments with all these colors, and therefore the houses, if you go to the Caribbean, are painted and very colorfully, and the flowers and the birds and the fish, and just life is more vibrant. And so when we begin to bring that into our work, emotionally, people, even in the cities in Chicago, were responding. And that's why the Kool-Aid colors were in their life. When you talk about the lime green pants and all of that at a time when the American ideal for a man was either gray, black, or dark blue pants, and the most you might get would be a light blue shirt or a yellow shirt with a rep striped tie. That was that's what the way America dressed. They didn't dress like this, like we dress today. And I think that Africobra and other African American cultural expression changed the way that America even sees color today. But it comes out of that environment. It's just a different world, a different worldview, and color symbolizes that to us. It evokes that sense of it. Festival, carnival, that's my impression of it. That's how it affected my life, even though my work has become subtle in certain ways. But it's not the naturalized color we find in Rembrandt's painting.
Well, I guess for me, having studied at UAPB, under the late John Howard, who was Jeff Dawson's mentor, and studying with Terrence Corbin, the idea of color and what color could actually say. And if you know Terrence Corbin's work, he's a colorist. And we seldom use black. We seldom use paint straight out of the tube. You always had to mix your colors. And to me, that was very important in displaying the message. Even when I talk about my work and the idea of my grandfather telling me the story about lynching, my work is not dark because we move beyond that. So then that's where the positive titles always come into play. And I feel like the color has to speak to you. I've shared with a lot of my collections that come and say, hey, you know what? I see every time I look at your painting or I see your piece, I see something else. And I see the spirit of the work, which I think that's the way when you look at Africobra, there's a spirit that speaks. And there's that language. Each one of us are doing totally different things, but there's that language of color. And I have a show up in North Carolina at one of the museums, and the title of the show is If Color Could Speak.
Okay, I'm going to go a couple
May I also add something? When I was in grad school, I was told to look at this book, Africa Adorned. And what I saw there was something that made me understand what gold is like. If you look at this gold chain against her skin, you put gold against Kevin's skin. You do that in Senegal, or you see the yellows that these women are wearing in their, against that skin. It's a whole different thing. It's amazing, and it's beautiful, and it's just, that aspect of color also plays out in your daily lives. I wouldn't tattoo very well, right? But you put some gold on Kevin, man, it's breathtaking. You see those Senegalese women with that red cloth and.
If I may say one little thing about color,
So this is the artist about color that they're going for.
For me, it is everything. And what we see in language is color. Language helps us to define color, and it didn't strike me very much until I got here how much language actually is what we see in color, when you read books about African art, they will tell you that there are 3 colors in Africa: red, white, and black. They couldn't be further from the truth that Africans recognize 3 colors: red, black, and white. Africa, that is what I learned in school until I went back to the village and studied with women artists who actually use color paint. And they were the ones who told me, hey, you go back to your professor and get your money back. we see our colors. And when I then began to reflect on what they said and the way they think about colors, I realized that the Western culture derives color from the white ray of light that passes through the prism and breaks it into the rainbow. In Africa, color is not just about light, it's about fire, about heat. So what they really are describing when they say Africans think about colors in 3, the Africans have three colors. What they are thinking about, what Africans really are talking about is that we define colors in terms of the cool, the hot, and the cold. And it is that intensity that comes from the burning of fire. And they demonstrated it to me by taking a piece of charcoal and they burnt it. And as the charcoal was burning, it displayed all the colors of the rainbow. And when it is done, it becomes white. So it totally liberated me to listen to these women now discuss color beyond what I was taught in school.
We're going to talk a little bit about you as individual artists relative to you being Africobra, because you know that movement is a social consciousness movement. It's a positive images of Black people. Everything, learning our own culture, sharing everything, it was always positive. But that social consciousness, social justice was to inform our people, okay? To educate us and to educate us to the aesthetics. So I want you, each one of you, to take about 10 minutes, and expound on your work over a time period and how has Africobra influenced you or how is it represented in your work? And then share a story with us. Leave us with a minute. About you, something you created, a story. You already shared 2 to 3 with me already.
Okay, could you
Okay.
just give me one question?
That is one question. Based on your work as an artist, being involved in the collective, Africobra, how has it influenced what you produce, your aesthetics? How, as this member, I can look at you and say, wow, you're an Africobra member because of that?
When I became a member of Africobra, I began to be a part of the critiques that we have. Many artists compete with each other because of the illusion of individuality. And so you're going to steal what I've got, and you're going to bite off of, you know. And what I learned in these critiques was how to talk about the work through the positive power of suggestion. You know, you might try this, you might try that. And it helped me grow because I call these people aesthetic scientists. The discussions I heard about technical aspects of the paint, how to charge a brush to make a stroke, how colors next to each other do certain things, you know, as well as composition and aesthetic judgments and all of those things was an intense learning experience for me. And I saw myself grow as an artist in many ways. And also, after a while, I gained confidence as I knew that I could put something in front of the group and it was strong enough to stand up, because you have to get an amen, right? You have to get that feedback. And that was a part of the process within the group of respecting your individual voice and knowing that that is what's going to differentiate us, even if we have the same aesthetic principles we're working from, if we're working on the same project. That individual voice that we have within our collective was going to allow us each to shine as our individual selves. And then learning about the Yoruba helped articulate that to me conceptually, because there's the saying there are 401 Orisha. Well, there's not. You don't count the number, but it means within this collective identity, there is room for you to be your own self and respect for you to have your own personality.
Okay, I guess I did have two questions. Now, describe one of your favorite pieces of work that represents everything you just said.
One of my favorite pieces of work.
That describes exactly what you just said now.
It's hard for me to do that because one of my professors used to say, don't fall in love with your work, because then you'll go back and try to recreate it. And so I'm always trying to move forward. And,
that's right.
it's like, just how do you describe which one of my daughters is my favorite? They both are. But I've learned and grown from them. So work that I used to love, I don't love as much, because as all artists will tell you, oh, my new stuff is much better.
Well, I guess for me, in 2006, I was working on the Warrior series. And then the Warrior series, it was about the late Maynard Jackson. And he was the first African-American mayor in Atlanta, and he just passed away. But he also gave me my first public art commission. And I talked about the idea of the neckties and the story my grandfather told me about African-American being lynched by their neckties on the way to vote. And the work I submitted to Africobra, it was about those pieces. So when the late Maynard Jackson died, I did a piece. I did a whole series that really connected with him, because I was fortunate enough to have met him. And when I was painting the mural for the Olympics, he was one of the people that they had selected in space to be on the wall. And in the interview, when they were interviewing him, they asked him, what did he want his legacy to be? He said he lived by a poem by Margaret Walker that said, when I die, would it matter if I was ever born? So that stimulated that series, and then the series moved on where I started including the scarf shapes to actually represent women. I was doing a visiting artist in Des Moines, Iowa, at the Des Moines Art Center. And there were a group of 11-year-olds I was working with. So I asked them to name me one major African-American female who had made major contributions to America. Only one that they could name was Oprah Winfrey. I had to do research on Catherine Dunham, Billie Holiday, Rosa Parks. And at that time, they were listening to African-American music. A cappella group by the name of Sweet Honey in the Rock. We're talking about the triumph of women. So the series became for the sisters who carry the burdens of other sisters. And inside these time capsules were their research papers. So they hung as scrolls about women. So then as I fast forward to talk about the idea of Africobra, in this recent series I call my Blanket series, if you notice, as I said earlier, all my titles are positive titles in my work. And that's what Africobra was about. Positive things about happening in the African-American community. So all these, you get these strips of paper that's folded. My mom, she used to be a housekeeper, and I remember folding blankets. And the show was inspired by a tapestry series I saw in Denver about the different cultures. So this series is a combination of that. But at the same time, I'm taking my old work, combining with the new, same concept with the neckties there. But then, when you look at the idea of my show, I was talking about if color could speak, I was also addressing the issue of Black Lives Matter. Even though it wouldn't put there, but it's not just there. But I'm addressing the issue of teaching high school, young boys being killed. So if color can speak.
I was listening to this music by this song by Miles Davis, Sketches of Spain, and I loved it. And then I decided to research it. How did it come about? And I found out that it's actually something that he rewrote, and that the original scoring was by a Spanish artist, and that it was done in the 30s, and that Miles Davis got hold of it, and he decided he needed to rewrite it. And I listened to various other writings of the same, various versions of the same song. And the original was Concerto, something, I can't remember the title of that, was a Concerto, and lots of other artists. If you Google it at some time, you'll see all of these other, the way in which several artists have played with that same idea. And the Miles Davis rendering is so different. The others are very lively. You could almost dance to them. And Miles Davis slows it down. And it's almost melancholy. I then began to listen more carefully to it. And what came to my mind was that Miles Davis at that time was hiding things into that music. And it opens with this metal instrument that you couldn't even finally define. And it then moves on and goes into several movements. And I realized that sketches of Spain could be sketches of pain. And that he was loading the work, especially in terms of the life that he was living at that time. It reminds me of the works of a Nigerian artist known as Fela. I don't know if any of you know Fela. And he was doing jazz music inspired by Miles Davis. And he decided to use what in Nigeria we call broken English, which is a pidgin form. Pidgin is like this combination of African idioms with the English language to come up with this hybrid language. And so it's broken English. Then I started thinking about broken images. And I then began to look at the work of a lot of African American artists. And I began to see this fracture, this brokenness. And if you look around the room, you'll see a lot of fractures in the composition of the artist. So the image for me then becomes a way of bringing together the fractures, but also a way to travel within the grooves of the broken forms.
Thank you. One of the things that I have noticed in reading and listening to Africobra is how highly educated its members are. Professional artists in the field. And we think of artists as always somewhere on the street corner painting and doing these things, and we never think of artists as being these highly educated individuals. And I'd be remiss as an educator if we did not have a segment in here where you talk about your educational journey and that importance in that art, your craft, and that so we be my law students, we want to make sure we emphasize that importance in the interview. I'm going to start with Kevin first.
Okay, start with me.
3 to 5 minutes.
Well, okay, I did my undergraduate at the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and I can remember my sophomore year. There were a group of high school students from Pine Bluff High in the art gallery. They was making noises, and they sent me in there to get them quiet. So being not far from the age, I knew the things they liked was to play games. So we played this dating game. And for about 3 hours, these students, they were quiet. And I went back to the office, and Professor Lynn, Terrence Corbin, and Hearne Fine there. They said, well, what did you do? I said, I played the game with them. And then they went on to talk to me about my education. And they said, well, what we want you to do when you finish here, we want you to go get your master's. I raised my hand, I said, I'm sorry, I don't play golf. But I didn't know what a master's degree was. Okay, so I didn't know, my parents didn't have their master's. So they explained it to me, they told me that, you're going to go get your master's. And so later, I got a fellowship to attend the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. And there, I finished that degree in a year. And upon going to Northern Illinois University, I was selected as a Rhodes Smith Scholar. So I got 2 master's degrees in 2 years. So the education part was always very important to me in terms of, I tell people, I always remind my wife when she tell me about cutting the yard, I was trained to be an artist. I went to school to become an artist. So that's one of the most important parts of being an artist. Education is the key in terms of life. And I was telling the students at UAPB, education is something nobody can ever take from you. And I think having that Master's of Fine Art degree teaches me how to work through situations. And as an artist, you always get stuck on the vein. And I would listen to him talk about Miles Davis. All of us listen to jazz. Everybody in Africobra listen to jazz. And there's a conversation about how you paint the music. You really don't paint the music, you paint the way the music makes you feel. So I think that's a major part of education. And if you ever had a critique, I mean, these guys are amazing. I mean, everybody reads the New York Times, what's happening in New York. We'll have a conversation, and in our critiques, if you're not ready, you would leave there crying. I mean, you would really, because everybody, we would try to be honest and tell the person why. I don't like it, or have you looked at that? I mean, have you considered this artist? So the educational part, I tell students, I get out in America, I get Art News, Art Forum, I make time to read every magazine. And as an educator, whenever students ask me about their work, I'll say, have you looked at this person? Have you looked at that person? And they wonder, how do you know all these people? But with society right now, you can just click a button and be anywhere you want to in the world. So it's important for you to look at other artists in terms of educating yourself about them, as well as educating yourself about your own work.
You didn't ask for audience participation.
I was going to say, is this a good time? When they finish, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to the audience. Okay.
What I found interesting when I was doing my field work in Nigeria, art has such an intellectual component that is not often enough recognized, and especially in the West, looking at African art. So when I was studying Lamine Fakir, I came to understand that as a carver, you do an apprenticeship with another carver, a master carver, for 4 years. And the first year, you don't touch anything, you're bringing water and you're watching. And then after you finish your apprenticeship, you might be an assistant to the master for another 4 to 10 years before you go out on your own, you know. And so that is a part of the excellence that you might see in the art. My personal journey, I felt it was more fun to go to school than to work, so I spent half my life in college. I got an undergraduate degree in art education, and I was focused on painting. I got a master's in painting, an MFA from Howard University. Then I got an MA in African American Studies, an MA in art history, an MPhil in art history, and a PhD in art history from Yale.
Wow.
And
What was the undergraduate degree?
Bowling Green, and then in Ohio. And then I've been teaching at, you know, which is a learning experience because you're learning to prepare, you're learning from your students and all of that. So I've taught on the high school level, I've taught as a substitute teacher, I've taught at HBCUs, Morehouse's, Spelman, you know, and Dillard. I've taught at, you know, as a visiting professor at Wellesley and Duke. And then I taught at North Carolina and Emory as well.
I'll make it pretty short. I studied in Nigeria. I had a first degree in painting. I had a master's in fine arts. In a way that included not just the visual arts, but poetry, fiction, and I was supposed to, my final presentation was supposed to reflect that.
But his father is a well-known writer in Nigeria.
Yeah, my father is a writer, and I thought I was going to be a fiction writer too. Then I realized that artists who are not written about basically disappear after their death. It's like they never lived. And I realized that was happening to a lot of African artists. Nobody was writing about them. And the moment they died, they disappeared. So that was why I decided I needed to go and do a PhD so that all of us don't disappear. At least the few that I can write about will live. And in writing about them, I also will live. So I came to Madison, Wisconsin and did a PhD. I have taught in universities all my life. I started teaching at the age of 21 and I'm now 60 years old. So I spent all my life teaching at university.
Okay. Thank you. I'm really tired of me. So I don't have a question and answer period to allow you time to pose questions to the artist. So we'll just take questions now if you have any. I can keep going all day long.
I want to ask about some of the role of the history of African art, and I was particularly thinking, as you're talking about Nigeria, of Ekpo Ayo, who used to teach at the University of Maryland where I got my PhD, that type of archaeological work and the heritage. If you could talk about some of the historical work, be it in this country or in Africa, that's inspired you, I'd be really interested to hear.
Ekpo Ayo started out as an archaeologist and was actually took his PhD pretty late. Later on, he tried to move into contemporary art himself. I don't think he was successful in doing that. But the idea of thinking about art in terms of traditional and contemporary seems quite problematic to me, because all of us are sharing the same mistakes. We are just using different materials. As a matter of fact, in terms of methodology, there is so much an artist could do. You have elements of design, you have principles of design, and wherever you come from, that's all you can play with. So the idea of this segmentation in African art is for me, just isn't there. I learn from the old objects, just like I learned from Picasso, from Michelangelo, from Jeff Donaldson, from Michael Hearne. So it's a seamless thing. I take ideas from wherever I would find them. And I think really it's important for artists to be that free. What probably guides me is not so much the technique, but what you use the technique to do. And I think that's where probably my work has its own purposes.
John Picton wrote an interesting essay that problematizes the notion of traditional and contemporary, because I know Onabolu was known as the father of Nigerian painting, and he brought European style painting to Nigeria and taught it, I guess, in the 1930s. One of the greatest carvers that I read about was Dada Ariabu, and he was just one of the greatest traditional carvers. His about masks are just amazing. And then one of the scholars, one of the artists whose work most benefited from this kind of carving was Pablo Picasso. Mm-hmm. So all three of these men were born between 1880 and 1882. So they were reaching their peak at the same time, right? So how do we talk about contemporary when the greatest traditional artist, the one who's introducing European type painting, and then the modernists whose work is based on African art are all emerging at the same time, which is a wonderful way to supplement, what you're talking about.
Another question?
Any other easy questions?
You guys want to leave a legacy for generations to come to look at. What advice would you give up and coming, not only African American artists, but artists in general? Because, traditionally, African Americans are encouraged to go into the arts. We don't have support from family and so forth. So what advice would you give to those who are up and coming or who are not really encouraged to go to this path?
Do it. Follow your heart. Be who you are. And if you are expressive, realize how important it is, because I've learned so much from studying African art. And the art materializes their spiritual ideas. It articulates cultural and social relationships. It defines ideals of who you are as a community. And it defines ideals of beauty. All of those things are materialized in creative expression. And we try to turn it into entertainment here. We try to turn the objects into nouns so that they become the commodities that we sell instead of the art as a verb, which is something you do that's a part of the process of us being here and being alive. So join that. It's important. Do it. And if you feel it, why not do what's important to you? Why be who you are not? Be who you are.
Well, I guess for me, I can recall that when I graduated from high school, I had a number scholarship offer. Some were sports, some were academic. And I remember talking to my dad. I told him I was going to go ahead, go to college and become a painter. He had been drinking, he got a gallon of paint, told me to the bus and paint the house. So, with that being said, but it wasn't until later later, till I was 41 years old, I picked him up from the airport. He came to Atlanta, and I was working on the painting, and then from that Wednesday to that Saturday, and a collector came in. He bought the work, and it was $7,500, and I hadn't even finished it. My dad looked at me with tears in his eyes. He said, "I had no idea that you can make a living at this stuff." I mean, he said, "You know, I'm really sorry for that." He said, "But I had no idea that, you know, this is what you do. And he said, this is what and you send us money home every month." And then he said, "Why don't you send me a little bit more?" So you have to follow your dream. And there's nothing like waking up in the morning, doing what you like. That passion. So then it does become, it's never for the money. You do it because you like it. And one thing that he did instill in me, he said, never chase money, let money chase you.
Right.
So if you want to be an artist, you know, that's something that you know, and, you know, getting ready to retire. I can't wait to wake up for 5:30 in the morning to go to my studio. But that's the passion now. If I don't do another painting, you know, if I was selling another piece of artwork, I'm doing it because I enjoy it.
Okay, yeah.
And I call him John Henry, because this is the hardest working man.
We got one question here and we'll have one on here.
Can you tell us about the works that are on the wall, the books?
Each one share a little bit about the works that are on the walls to represent
The work that I have in here, there's two things going on. One, some photo-based work that on that wall at the end that plays with different ideas and experiences. You know, women and how their hair changes over time, and you can begin to look at a woman's life through her hair. African elements behind a lot of the work that I do, because if we begin to recognize that heritage, then it takes us back to creation. If you talk about slavery as your heritage, it takes you back to the Atlantic shore, but it won't get you back to God. And all people see themselves as creation. And then the piece in the corner, and I'm going very quickly because we don't have a lot of time, is a duet I did with James Phillips, where we took one of my images, he responded, and then I came back to it, so it was almost like, you know, two musicians playing off of each other in a solo, because I think that the individuality that we look for in an artist also is, in our group, tempered by this kind of collective impact that we have upon each other.
Okay, well, I do like quickly, as I talked about earlier, symbolism with neckties and scarves. But a lot of symbolism in my work, if you look at I started working on tar paper after September 11th. Then you got the rod that symbolized the cane that my grandfather used when he laid it down and drew in the sand. But I'm always conscientious about numbers. And coming from a strong Christian background, I like numbers such as 5 is a number of completion. You got 7 is a biblical number. You got 8 is a number of new beginnings. So you may have these rows in numbers. So that is some of that concept and symbolism in my work.
My images, which are there, reference the indigenous Yoruba ways of thinking about the figure in terms, not the anatomy of the figure, not in terms of really what you see, but in terms of analysis, in terms of concept, the emphasis on the head, and the focus on the woman as the basis of life, the female body as the origin of life, and the first fruit the first giver of fruit to humanity, because the female body itself is endowed with the capacity to feed the world. So that's that sense of the female body as nourishing, but also as the body that seems abused in virtually every culture. Is one of the things I begin to address, and that is why at some point I started introducing the gun, the machine gun, into that body to show the sense of awe that is within that body if you pay attention.
Thank you. We had a question over here.
I don't know if it had anything to do with art or just personal, if it's not, should even be on question. But a lot of times I'm inspired to do a painting, and just about the time I'm starting to do it, something else comes up. Something about, will anybody buy it? You know. I don't know if it's just a personal issue of mine. I don't know if you guys go through that or anything. It's just something that I thought I'd bring up and ask somebody if they experienced that, and if they could give me some kind of a guide to how I should answer that for myself.
Well, I think that you just got to do it. Because I was telling somebody else, I was looking at the Republican convention. And right now, I'm doing a piece called Midnight in America. And where I have the flag draped, a necktie holding up on one side, and a noose holding on the other side. I'm good. But it just, I gotta get it out of my system. I mean, straight behind Martin, I did 3 or 4 pieces about that you may not never see. And one of the things that stood out was when my son came to me and they read the verdict, he said, "Dad, did you hear the comment that George Zimmerman made, they always get away?" There are 17 letters and they always get away. Trayvon was 17 years old. But I did it, but you may not never see it. But I had to get it out of my system.
What Kevin said, his father told him, never chase money, let money chase you.
Yes.
So if you do what you do with integrity, that's it.
Just like I got a good guy over here and a bad guy over here, and every time I go to the good guy or the bad guy, and the good guy, well, you know, so.
Well, let the art make you. Don't always be the one making the art, because the process is a dialogue. Talk to the world, stay enough with the world to the point that it begins to make you too. And at some point, it becomes just like what Kevin was saying, it becomes like you need to eat, because you need to feed yourself. And to be able to feed yourself, you have to do that eating. And it comes out of you just like you go to the bathroom. It becomes a necessity.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure to sit here. These are some of the most influential artists in the country right now, sitting here at Hearne Fine Art Gallery in Little Rock, Arkansas.
That's right.
It's a blessing to have you here. But I don't want to say, they say being must control. So I'm going to leave each one of you to have a concluding thought to leave with, take a minute or two, and then we can close out. So I got to get to the airport. Concluding thought.
thank you for coming. Your interest feeds me.
I feel the same way, but I want to say something. I see we got a lot of young artists. It was something the late Elizabeth Murray told me. She said, when you find yourself, you find yourself.
I want to say that the African American culture is clearly the most advanced culture on this planet. It's a culture that is incredibly creative. It's always the leading edge culture, is the next culture, is a culture everybody feeds on. And I don't know if people do know this, but from the outside looking in, one sees this very clearly. It's a culture that has changed